here. So we're going to go live in 3, 2, 1. Welcome everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today on this lovely Friday afternoon. If you haven't joined us for one of our chats before, my name is Meg. I am part of the Power to Fly virtual hosting team, and I am super excited to jump in with y'all on this great chat we have going today with Kensho. Before we get started, I just want to share a couple quick housekeeping items with y'all. Like all of our virtual events, we really want all of you to feel included. We want you to feel like this is as interactive an experience as possible for you. So to that effect, you are more than welcome and highly encouraged to turn your cameras on. I love seeing everybody's maskless, safely smiling faces, especially now that, you know, it's become more of a thing. You know, I get sick of just seeing my husband and my dogs. So if you like, please feel free. No need to be insta perfect. I think I'm rocking day 4 or 5 of dry shampoo. So messy buns, furry coworkers, non-traditional desk spaces, everything is encouraged. We just love to see you participate with us. If you do, the one thing I will let you know is if you do want to participate by coming off mute to ask a question, highly encouraged. But if you do so, if you come off mute for any reason, you will show up in the virtual or in the recording of today's event as well as the live stream. So if you have any privacy concerns, you can still turn your cameras on. You won't be on the recording. Just don't come off mute. If you still want to, ask questions or add comments, but you don't want to show up on the live recording, then not a problem. You can just put any questions, comments, whatever you have in the Zoom chat. And if you are in like Black Ops, deep cover, don't want anyone to know you were here for whatever reason, I don't care. You can send any questions or comments to me in a DM. So in that Zoom chat, just pick my name from the dropdown instead of everyone. And I will be monitoring those questions and I'll try and get those submitted to our guest speaker. Like I said earlier, today's session is being recorded. So if you, if you hear something today that Melissa drops that is just like mind blowing and you have to share it with somebody, a coworker, a relative, friends, anybody, we really encourage you to do that. So while we're going today, you're more than encouraged to, take video or post pictures, tell everybody that you are spending time with and learning with Power to Fly today. Just make sure you tag us. We are at Power to Fly on like basically all social media channels, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and I think I'm missing one, YouTube, and Twitter. And then you can always use the hashtag Power to Fly so our social team can find that and give you a shout out. You can also, like I said, if you do want to like spread that video around or share something with people, we are going to send all of the participants, everybody that registered for today's session. So whether you spend 2 minutes with us, 30, the full 60, or if you just couldn't join but you registered, hi people in the future, everybody that registers is going to get an email in 1 to 2 business days, probably like, I would say like Tuesday-ish next week, that'll have a link to rewatch this whole session. You can also, if you're really impatient, check out our YouTube channel, like I mentioned. This video will be posted there as soon as we're done. Like the recording will be done as soon as the live stream ends. And yeah, you can always share those with people. It's always free to watch our videos. So please, dive into our archives and check all that stuff out. You can also check on past information or past videos on our YouTube channel. And I highly recommend you subscribe to it because it makes sure that you don't miss great videos like today's with Kensho. So yeah, keep up with us on social. Yeah, and so we'll just get ready to dive right into today's session with Melissa. So I'm really excited to introduce y'all to Melissa. Melissa is currently the CTO for the Boston-based AI fintech company Kensho. She started her career almost 20 years ago as a software engineer at FactSet Research Systems. She has experience both as an individual contributor as well as a team leader. And as the proud mother of 2 school-age children, she is no stranger to navigating the interactions and balance and integration of professional and family life. So Melissa, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Meg. I really appreciate it. And thank you for setting the tone. And it's a nice high energy tone. I appreciate that.
This is my favorite part of my job. I love this. So yeah, you're welcome. So is there anything you'd like to add to that bio before we keep going?
I think you covered it. This is something I'm really excited to be sharing with folks. I know there's a lot of folks from Kensho that are on, so I'm excited for them to hear, a little bit about my experience and some things that I can hopefully impart to the larger crew here.
Great. All right. So as we get going here, I do just want to call out. I do want to call out the Kensho page on Power to Fly. So I'm going to be dropping some links here into the Zoom chat in just a minute. But one thing I want to highlight for you is that if you want to learn more about Kensho, if you want to check out what their open roles are, anything like that, what you can do is go to the link that I'm going to drop for you. It's going to take you to Kensho's company page on Power to Fly. So when you get to this page, it'll look much like this. In the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there's going to be a big pink follow button. If you are at all interested in Kensho, I highly recommend that you click that follow button. What it's going to do is it's going to put you on Kensho's follow network. Now that's visible to Power to Fly admins, as well as Kensho's HR team and their hiring group. So what it's going to do is tell Kensho that you are very interested in working with them. It's also a really awesome thing to do if you don't see anything in their jobs listing that really applies to you right now, but you're still interested in them. So what that does is it makes sure that, like, if Power to Fly is sourcing for Kensho, or anytime Kensho goes to post new roles, they can see who's on that list and see, like, okay, on this short list, is there anybody in here that fits what we're trying to post? The other thing it does for you is it alerts you when Kensho posts new roles, so you don't have to feel like you keep coming back to check a job board that doesn't change, or you miss everything that gets loaded on one day and you don't see it for a week. And it's also going to, so kind of act like your friend at the company that's like, hey, they're posting this role, like you should take a look at it. And it's also going to let you know when they participate in events like today, like our virtual career fairs, our mini summits, our chat and learn, or our office hour sessions, any of that stuff. So definitely do click that button if you're at all interested. It's also really great to know that while today's session is focused on Kensho, you can follow as many companies as you want on Power to Fly. You can follow and unfollow at will. So if you're interested in various companies, definitely check that out and keep that follow network in mind. And you, like I said, you can always unfollow at any time. So as we get going, before we get started jumping into the questions, I'm going to stop on these two slides. There's just this one and the next one for a couple seconds each. These are the questions that y'all pre-submitted. We tried to, kind of round them up, condense them, take out redundant ones, and arrange it into a conversational format. So take your screenshots if you like. These are the kind of questions that we're trying to get to today. I'm going to go to the next slide. We probably won't get to all of the questions. So if your question was pre-submitted and you want to make sure it gets asked, best way to do that is to either come off mute, which you can do, try not to interrupt people. Don't come off mute if you're not actively speaking. That way we can kind of keep the audio clarity clear for everyone. You'll know that you'll see that I do this a lot, so that nobody has to hear the dogs snoring under my desk. But just make sure that if you do come off mute, it's highly encouraged. Just try not to interrupt, any of our other attendees, our guest speaker. I can get very long-winded, so please feel free to interrupt me if you have a question you'd like to ask. But as we go through this and you want to make sure that you get your question asked, you can either come off mute, you can put your question into the Zoom chat, and I will try and make sure that we get to everything that's submitted. All right, so hope you got your screenshots if you need them. No, you don't have to take notes because you can always review this later. So as we jump in today, Melissa, I want to talk about, kind of this idea of comparison, right? So do you have any tips to combat comparing ourselves to others? This person says, I've done a lot of career exploration, which has led to a lot of lateral moves, whereas some of my friends have made more vertical moves.
Yeah, so first off, Meg, your dog snoring is adorable. But secondly, the easiest answer I can give here, and it's the truth, is that you should limit your comparisons, right? Don't compare yourself to other people. And there's a reason for this. There's a lot of variability in opportunities and experiences that you're likely doing an apples to oranges comparison anyway. I also think that there's a false perception that vertical moves lead to some pinnacle of a role. And in reality, there are challenges in any role and any level. They just look different. And this is the case, whether or not you're a people leader or if you're a senior technical contributor, your perception of what that role is very different when you're in that role. So I think comparison, you want to limit the amount of comparison that you do there. And really, removing kind of the economic, family, and like market considerations as you're on your journey. The most important thing, I think, within your field is to find out what intrinsically motivates you, what you find rewarding, and work your way towards finding a role that most closely aligns to that. And then, while you're on that path, commit to it, right? Deliver value, learn from it. And in this way, it's entirely possible that, someone who's doing more lateral moves finds more value in having that lateral kind of breadth of institutional knowledge, it could be equally or more valuable than having kind of a vertical, trajectory. And I'm speaking from experience because my own path was totally nonlinear, going from team member to, leading a small team, to doing contract work, from home, to team member, leading a small team again, medium, and now an engineering organization. So it is possible to have a nonlinear path and have that work for you as well.
Thank you for calling that out, because I feel like a lot of times it's really easy to compare. I feel like one of the really common refrains is like, don't compare somebody else's highlight reel to your like full life story. So it's really important to know that lateral moves and kind of zigzagging to get there is not the only way. You hear about this career ladder, but it's really a lot more like sort of chutes and ladders with like walkways and scaffolding in between.
That's right.
So yeah, thank you for kind of calling that out and helping highlight that, because it feels like if you're not constantly advancing, it's not success. And it's important to note that like you can be in the same role for a while and still be learning things that help drive your career and help make you either better at what you do or advance your career without changing jobs, changing the titles, getting the bigger office, all that kind of stuff.
Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. All right. So what is your best piece of advice for combating imposter syndrome? I feel like we hear a lot about this recently, which makes it feel like maybe it's a little bit buzzwordy, but it's a very common thing for people. And so, how are some ways that you fight this?
Yeah, this is a great question. So I have 3 pieces of advice. So the first one, and this is going to sound hokey, but it's really the truth. It's about mindset. So you've got to train yourself to have a growth mindset. I didn't know what growth mindset was until a couple of years ago when my school age kids came home singing the Power of Yet song from Sesame Street by Janelle Monáe. You guys can Google that later, but you're not going to be an expert on day one of any new venture. It's a role or a job change. So you really have to cut yourself some slack there and don't be apologetic about it, right? Just be real about it. Focus on, how to get to where you want to be, instead of being mired in this downward spiral, because this gets easier over time as you make more role changes and stuff like that. So that's the first one. So train yourself to have a growth mindset, and you're not there yet, but you'll get there. The second one is make sure that you have a solid grasp of the fundamentals of your field. So in my case, I'm going to try not to get too specific, just because I know that there's folks on the call who might not have a tech background. So, but this really applies for any field, right? So you're in an industry, your field, you want to make sure that you have a solid grasp of that. And the reason is because then you're able to make educated leaps when you're presented with something that's unfamiliar or new. And this is especially true in tech, where there's like shiny new toys all the time. So that's one that I find really a good way to combat imposter syndrome. And then the third one is to ask well-formed questions. So when you ask a very open-ended, like, how does this work? Or, is this a good choice? You're not reinforcing to yourself that you're coming with that question with some context, with some knowledge, right? So if you ask a well-formed question, start with some context about what it is that you're trying to get at, so that one, it reinforces to yourself that okay, I'm making a leap. I know something, I don't know everything, and it gives the person that you're asking a little more of something to work with, so that you have a confidence that the exchange that is going to ensue from asking the question is going to be a positive one, and then you'll have that confidence knowing going in. So those are the 3 things that I think are really helpful to help combat it.
Thank you. I think it's really great to get that like top 3 kind of thing, because it's a lot easier to try and remember, even if you don't remember all 3 at once, you might, there'll be one that sticks in your head. So I think that's a great way to go about it. And just to call out for people, you are highly welcome to come off mute, ask questions, and to submit them into the Zoom chat if you'd like to. Connie is chiming in the chat here saying, I think that is a really good point. Asking a well-formed question also lets the other person know that you had tried to research the question first. I feel like that's, at least with Power to Fly, I'm sure it's probably the same at Kensho. A lot of what we do is, we ask around to see if anybody has, the answer to whatever particular question, project, problem we're having. And then if nobody does, then it's like very much encouraged, like, okay, go out and research, like figure out what you can find. And if there's other people that are interested in the answer, then bring the answer back. But yeah, it's good to know, it's good to start with that question, not just cold turkey, not just saying like, well, I don't know how to do this. Like,
exactly. Yeah, we really value resourcefulness. And me personally, I've said this to a bunch of colleagues before, where yeah, you got to do a little bit of the due diligence on your own, which, it's you get a twofer there, right? You're giving yourself the confidence that you've done enough, and then you're valuing the other person's time by asking them this kind of well-formed question. So yeah, there's a lot of benefit there.
Yeah. All right. So this person wanted to know, are there any hacks to accelerating the move from self-doubt to self-confidence? For me, it was a lot of like fake it till you make it. And some days that was more successful than others. But that also feels like kind of a slog. So are there any, hacks that you have or any kind of like shortcuts you found?
Yeah, I mean, it's a tricky question, right? Because there's no silver bullet to always knocking it out, but there are things that will put you in a better mindset and things that will put you in a better mindset. So the first one is, the realization that negative ego is just as insidious, if not worse, than what we all think of when we hear the word ego, right? An obsession with self, whether it's inflated or deflated, right, is not healthy. You need to find a balance of healthy self. There was this piece that aired on NPR recently around the election, and apologies, I didn't have the right permutation of words to find the link to this. So hopefully somebody else can, based on what I'm saying. But they talked about the fact that we have unfettered access to our own thoughts 24/7. So when we land on the side of an issue, we know that a lot of thought has been, put into that opinion. But if somebody else has an opposing opinion, we don't seem to extend that benefit to them, that they've also thought really hard about that opinion. So I found this to be a really interesting human trait. And the reason I share it is twofold. And one is that, we need to be cognizant about what types of thoughts we allow ourselves to explore, right? And it's like, how is this thought serving me? Am I going through a downward spiral? And secondly, the kind of cold, hard truth that no one else is thinking about your actions nearly as much as you are. So that's one, just a mindset shift. And then the second one, which is an easier hack, I think, is to carve out time to do stuff that you're already confident in doing, right? It gives you positive energy, especially physically, because we all know you get those mental benefits if you're able to do something physically as well, and time it with doing something that you're particularly not confident about. So maybe it's a job interview, or maybe it's a presentation to a new team, or maybe it's a hard decision that you have to make. My preference is to feed two birds with one stone, go out for a run, do a hard 20-minute workout. Because in that case, you're setting a goal. It's not a hard decision, right? There's no ambiguity. It's start it, finish it. You feel really good. It gives you that little boost of confidence that you need, and you get all the other mental health benefits. So in terms of a hack, I think that's a pretty good one.
First off, I completely forgot about that phrase, feed two birds with one scone. So thank you so much for reminding me of that, because it's wonderful. Plus you get to say scone, and like as Americans, we don't really get to say scone a lot. So,
I will fess up, Meg. Somebody at work used that with me yesterday, and I slacked him earlier, like, I'm going to use that because I love that phrase. So.
But that's the thing. Like there's been so many of those things where I've like heard something and like drop it on the chat, or somebody else says something. I'm like, oh, that's great. And they're like, well, I heard it somewhere else. Okay, that doesn't negate the fact that you're the one that told me. Like, that's awesome. Spread the wealth, spread the great nuggets that we all really need and can really kind of call back, even if people don't remember verbatim what we talked about on today's chat. And like, I absolutely love what you're talking about like, people aren't really thinking about you as much as you're thinking about you. I remember like a super mind blown moment I had, like, oh my God, years ago, probably 5 or 8, was when I read this thing that basically said, people aren't anti-you, they are pro them. So when you're trying, like you said, like trying to evaluate like somebody posting what, some thoughts that they have on something, generally speaking, most people are not trying to attack you, even, with like, politics at work, or, the divvying up of tasks for a project to complete or something. They're not thinking about how can I screw this person over. They're thinking like, well, that's what I want to do. That's the easiest. That's the most glory. That's, whatever. So that really helped change my mindset from like this defensive kind of thing of thinking like, well, I need to keep achieving. I need to keep pushing myself because all these other people are like, kind of running this race against me. It's like, no, we're all in the race. Like, there is no one winner. People are going to lead, and it's this marathon, not a sprint, and people are going to lead and fall behind at different times.
Mm-hmm.
Love that. Sorry, I get really long-winded when we touch on like great ideas like that. So I'll try and keep it to a minimum so people can hear from you instead of me.
Oh, it's great. No, I love it.
Tyler is also coming on in the chat saying to the imposter syndrome question, and he's grappled, I assume he has grappled at length with this myself. I have found it helpful to hold firm in my desire to approach others understanding every person has many things they can teach me, while also genuinely believing that I have many things I can teach them as well. And that's such a great thing to think. Like, does Kensho kind of take that same stance, or do you take that same stance in your career?
Oh, absolutely. We talk about like humility all the time as being a really, really good trait. And I think it's even more important, as you advance in your career, just because you're a quote unquote expert on something, or you have a lot of experience in something, having that humility is amazing, right? Because it shows to other people that, yeah, I know a lot, but there's still more to go. And there's things I can learn from other people. I think that's an incredibly good quality to have.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, I've heard before people that like kind of balk at the term humility. Like, don't think of it as having like humility. Think of it as having like value and respect for other people and their accomplishments. Because if you want them to like respect your accomplishments, you need to give it before you can get it.
That's right. I think the other thing, Meg, too, is that we talk a lot about having, curiosity at Kensho. So people continuously want to learn, right? So that implies that there's always something to learn, right? So it's another thing that I think is an important thing to highlight. We highlight it on our website somewhere that we talk about, continuous learning as being a value that we hold true. And I hope that it comes across as meaning, even if you're in a kind of a senior technical contributor role, we still carve out time for everyone to learn something new.
Yeah, I love that. Melissa is coming on the chat to say that she tells this to her husband on a not infrequent basis when he encounters difficult tech support customers. Something like, honey, they didn't wake up in the morning thinking, how can I mess this guy up? Like, it's very important to kind of like have that attitude shift, right? Even if you can't really change the situation, and even if you're not necessarily like a real Pollyanna kind of person, you can at least like come up a few degrees from where where your attitude was sitting at the start of this, because it's easy to react like that, and that's fine. But you don't want to react in a way that you're then going to have to walk back.
Right.
All right. So this next person wanted to know, what advice can you share about how to know when you are ready to step up and take on a formal leadership role?
Yeah. So I would say that if you've had practice with some of the skills that you'll need to flex more in a leadership role, that would be a good indicator that you're ready. So for instance, I have a few examples. If you've had enough practice pitching ideas or influencing someone by leading with why, like, this is why I think this is, we should do something, right? And that's steeped in facts and principles and not emotions. If you practice doing that, then that's a good thing. If you've had enough instances where you've proven to be adaptable, right? So it's whether or not it's at work or in your personal life, but your new role will likely not be 100% what you envisioned it to be, because how could it be? You can't forecast exactly what it's going to be, right? You only have a notion of what it might be. So how are you going to handle that when you're presented with different circumstances than you thought? Will you look at it as a new challenge or a hurdle, right? So again, the best indicator there, if you're ready, is if you can demonstrate that you've been adaptable before. And I'll just give you an example from my experience. So there was a time at Kensho where I was leading a small team, and we were short on resources for a particular project, and we had a particular deadline, and we needed a specific type of and I say, excuse me for saying resources, we're people. We were short on people, to fill in a void, and there was a specific a specific technology that we were using, and I had that skill, and so my predecessor at the time asked, hey, can you fill this void? And I looked at that as an opportunity, right? So there's a lot of different ways you can look at that, but I really looked at that as an opportunity, and it was delivering value, right? I was learning something new, and I was actually really excited about it when I was in it. So again, it's being adaptable, right? And then another couple things. I identify what you need or what you think you need. So even if it's, an external resource or network or training, identify where you think your gaps are, and then ask, right? So don't expect your manager to know all your gaps, especially initially. Once you start, in your new role and you start developing a better relationship and rapport, then you'll have discussions about how to grow. But, off the bat, to be prepared for that and to know that you're ready for that, try to identify where you think your gaps are and put yourself in situations that help, and then ask. And then I think lastly, I would say to take advantages of opportunities that test your readiness. So the example I'm thinking of is that we have an internal mobility program at Kensho, which I've been heavily involved in as an interviewer. I really love it. I can't say enough about it. But I've learned something about every single person that I've spoken with. And I'm super proud that they felt like they could put themselves out there, and knowing that they may or may not get that role. But now we're in a better position to understand the development areas and prepare them for next time. So I highly, highly encourage people to put themselves out there. It's all good practice for future opportunities, if not for that one. So yeah, those are my tips.
I have a quick question, Melissa.
Yeah, go right ahead.
Because you actually explained it very well. I'm just trying to not to derail your thing. What do you think about the having mentor? Because a lot of time, I can tell you right now I'm in a different position because I learned by myself. What you are saying, absolutely right. Because I'm just saying, when you are in a technical role and suddenly circumstances just like push you to the management role, and you have no time to even gauge yourself, you are ready for this or not. So you think like a mentor, just like to have a mentor who you can talk to, which can give you some kind of suggestion. Would you think it's a good idea to have?
Yeah, that's a good question. And you also said management role, and I think it doesn't necessarily have to be a management role. Like there's a lot of role changes that require, maybe it's a senior technical role and not
right. That's what I mean, to just like a lead role or manage means like a manager, but it's just like a lead role. Because that thing happened with me. I was a technical developer, and we have an architect and who left us in the middle of that. And as you mentioned, you have a project to deliver, and you just put your thing volunteer, like I can do that, not knowing that, this is gonna put you into further, right? It's like, okay, I will fix that. And then I came to know, just like, here you go, you just deal with this role now, because we do not have anybody. So
there's a couple of things I'll say. So that's the adaptability thing, right? So if you might be thrown into a situation that you're not quite ready for, and then you just got to hit the ground running and figure out how to make up for it on the other end. Yeah. So I think this question was more about, how do you know when you're ready? It sounds more like you have a little preparation time. So I would suggest if you have a proclivity for a certain type of role, that you start thinking about it now, just in case, right? And start getting prepared, and make sure, going back to like, do you have the grasp of fundamentals that you think you need? Expand your kind of breadth of knowledge across the company in case opportunities arise. So I think preparing yourself for that potential sets you up a little bit better. But yeah, there's going to be cases where somebody leaves, or something, the life happens type of thing, where that's when you lean on your adaptability there, and just, okay, now what? I'm in the situation, and now what, right? So now how can I get that best help that I need? And it might be after you take on that role that you figure out, okay, these are the next steps I need to take to accelerate my growth in it, if you don't have that time to prepare for it.
Yeah, no, thank you so much.
Sure.
Thank you so much for coming off mute with that question, Gunjan. That was great. I'm sure I probably butchered your name, so I apologize. Yeah, that's awesome. So before we leave this question, I do just want to kind of touch on something that was brought up in the chat a little bit. So Jenny had said, I often realize I'm ready to take on a new role or more responsibilities when there's a confluence of interest in that role, and I'm feeling a little scared. If it's scary, then I know it's something I need to do and not shy away from. And I think that's a hard thing to think, right? Because fear is there for very valid reasons. And it's one of those things we talk about when people are applying to new jobs. Like if you apply to a job, you have 100% of the qualifications for this, and you can do this job, you might get there and realize you're bored once you adjust to the new company and get yourself, integrated with that. you don't want to get into something and realize like, oh, there's no more growing I can do in this role because I already know everything, or I know what I need to know to accomplish it. So I think, Jenny makes a really good point about like having to listen to that fear and a little bit seek it out, which is so antithetical to most, the way most of us function, just, because of, our lizard brain or whatever.
I think
you sought out.
I think one of the things I'll add on there as well, Meg, is that if you can shift that fear, again, sorry, going back to mindset, but if you can shift that fear to excitement, then it feels different, right? So it's if you can channel that, I think that's also a really healthy way of looking at it.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. All right, so I'm trying to check to make sure there were no other questions or add-ons that stuck with this question. Yeah, okay. So Tyler also had a question proposal for you and thinks it's related to all the questions so far. Can you speak to any intangible accomplishments you believe you have that serve as sources of confidence or self-worth? Like not things like degrees, job titles, the normal like trappings, but like intangible accomplishments that you can reach or look back on to help with that confidence. And I know this can be a rough question or could be like kind of a deep answer. So if you want to like think about it and come back to it, we could do that as well.
Yeah, I'm trying to think about, I don't have specifics on, so I will come back to it, but I do feel like the question's interesting because, certification or something like that is tangible, but so is, like marked experiences, I would say I could point to rather than like fuzzy feelings. So it's kind of like thinking about, I probably have to point to experiences that really have boosted confidence. I've definitely had a couple of those over my career where, I've had nerves or excitement about something and then it just worked, or it just, there was a particular thing at FactSet where I was in charge of the release of an initiative. It was an initiative back in 2011, I believe. It's called the Option Symbology Initiative, and it's something I'm super proud of because I led the effort for FactSet to be able to respond to this market initiative that was happening. So FactSet's also fintech. And basically all of the options identifiers, so options being an asset, right? The identifiers for them were going to go kaput. Like basically they were just changing it. Like, oh, we're not going to have a formal identifier. But the problem is we had clients that had these identifiers, hard coded in their portfolios, and they would upload them to FactSet. And so we had all these kind of sticky points of, well, crap, now what type of thing. And so I came up with a plan for how we were going to handle that on the day that, it was going to happen, and it went off without a hitch. And I actually had, I remember somebody on the market data team came up to me the next morning and was like, so nothing happened. That's a good thing, right? And it was awesome. So it's moments like that. So you've got to put yourself in those situations and don't shy away from them. So those sorts of experiences, I think, have given me a lot of confidence along the way.
Thank you, Melissa. That was exactly the type of thing that I was looking for, because I've struggling in recent times with this idea of having to potentially encapsulate my value in a resume, where at the same time, I believe most of my value cannot be expressed in that format. So I feel as if much of my self-worth comes from experiences like what you just shared. And how do I tell that to, prospective employers on a piece of paper,
That's a really, you've segued to a question later that maybe we could we jump to that now, Meg? Could we jump to it?
Let me look for it in the deck here, and I'll go through it while you're kind of addressing Tyler's, and then we can see if there's more different sections.
Sure. Yeah, the question is about articulating your successes and strengths, and do you have any advice for that? Was the question for me, and I think this points to the thing that you just asked about, which is how do you represent your strengths and your learnings on a piece of paper to somebody, right? So to answer that, the first thing is success is not an objective construct, right? So you have to first ask, who are you trying to impress upon, right? Who are you trying to make an impression on? So if it's is it yourself? Is it your manager? Is it your team? Is it a new company? So possibly a stranger, interviewing you. And then you get into a frame of mind to map what you view as success to what the other person values, right? So for instance, to a startup or a small company, if you're adaptable, that's a sought after strength. So make sure you can articulate how. So I'm going to give you a piece of advice and then get into some specifics. So one thing that you can do is keep a brag document. So this is something, if you Google Julia Evans brag document, she's fantastic. She's a blogger, among other things, that some Kenshans tune me into. But she recommends having a brag document. So you list your accomplishments. And one of the benefits of doing this is that you can keep track of things over time and look for patterns, right? So I'll give you some examples, right? If you notice that you are consistently helping your team get over the finish line of an initiative, right? You can confidently say on a resume, their dedication is a strength, right? And you can say why, and you can point to why and say, well, there's been, five times that I've done this over the past 2 years, right? You can qualify that. Another one is, if you notice that you're consistently unblocking others, on your own accord, or fixing problems that you find, taking initiative now becomes a strength. Another one is if you're able to solve client-induced errors or determine the root of an issue, by debugging, and you do this often and you do this independently, you're detail-oriented, you're a good problem solver, and you can confidently say that because you've observed it and you have it written down. So that's my recommendation to you, Tyler. That might help you articulate that better on resumes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for that. And perhaps to solidify my understanding, would it be fair to kind of summarize that as, maybe whip open a text editor or a piece of paper and just journal all of the different things that you think all the different scenarios and experiences in which you think you have brought value to perhaps your company, or ways in which you think you bring value to the environments that you're in. And then from that unstructured document, identify patterns so that you can perhaps quantitatively express those things that, there's much detail behind those things, and then put that into a more compact, format.
Yeah, exactly. I think you hit on another thing really quickly before we move on, is how have you delivered value to the company, right? Because you're just saying, I know X thing, or I'm an expert in X doesn't translate, right? It's well, great, but how have you used the fact that you knew that, right? So I think that's key, and you already have that, which is great, and you already know that.
Yeah, we hear that a lot on these. Don't just talk about the skills you acquired, not necessarily, or don't just talk about the tasks that you completed. Mm-hmm. Talk about the impact. Talk about what if there's metrics involved about how you were able to increase productivity or lower case time or whatever. But then you could also absolutely touch on spearheaded this project, better learned the value of time management or something. That's absolutely something you can put on a resume, especially since we're no longer really contained to the one page kind of format, since everybody's, sending them digitally and not printing them. Don't go nuts, 5 pages obviously isn't great, but I think that's a really good thing to call out. Thanks, Melissa. And thanks for that question, Tyler. That's great. All right, so before we move on here, Josephine is saying about she never thought about channeling that fear or excitement into passion, and thinks that's a really great idea. This other person, where did it go? Lost it. Somebody had questions about how you make yourself channel that fear into action, and kind of how to push past that. Can you talk a little bit about maybe some way that you've done that in your experience?
Yeah, and this might actually touch on another question as well. So I'll think about which question that is in a moment. But yeah, I mean, it's just like any other fear, right? So if you have a fear of heights, getting into a plane is a good way to combat this. It's just facing it head on and knowing that you have to do it. So the specific example I'll give you is the first time that I had to give hard feedback, right? So it was my first time, I think, being a manager, and I knew it had to happen. So I was confident that the thing had to happen, but I wasn't confident that I'd be able to do it. And I think the confidence in knowing that I had to give this feedback to the person, and the reason I knew is because I've had really good feedback and I know how it impacts me. And so, I would be remiss not to extend that to somebody else, right? So, that confidence kind of shifted from, okay, I'm afraid to, like, I need to do this. I'm excited about doing this for the person because I know what it means for me to have that feedback. And just to follow up on what happened there, I kind of bungled it a little bit, but I got the gist out, and no, the person did not receive it amazingly. But a couple days later, the person came back and said, I see what you're saying. Like that makes sense. I really appreciate the feedback. So, no, it wasn't, a 10 in terms of performance, of giving that feedback, but you have to do it. Otherwise you have no practice. Like you can't ever be perfect at giving feedback or good at giving feedback if you haven't made mistakes and learned from them. So you just got to do it.
Okay. So I think this might've been the question you were talking about like having a hard time asking for new challenges. If it's not, tell me and we can go to another one.
Let's see. Hard time asking for new challenges. I think it was,
or was there a different one?
I think it was a different one, but but we can do this one. Actually,
okay. Don't worry about it, because we can. We've got a bunch of questions in the chat that'll lead us into other questions that were pre-submitted too.
Cool.
All right. So one thing I want to talk about here, Tatiana had asked in the chat saying, I see a disconnect between HR and management usual practice of looking for 100% skill fit. And she's kind of addressing what I had said previously about being bored of having the job that you have if you have 100% skill fit for the next one. Does Kensho address that in its hiring practice in any way?
So I'm not sure I follow. So it addresses.
Like, is it asked, like, does Kensho ask these kinds of questions of like, well, if you have everything here, are you going to be bored? Or do they like, are they in the habit of not necessarily wanting somebody with 100% match to everything on their ask list to, fill the role? Does that make sense?
I think so. Yeah, I think that the most important thing is looking for, again, a couple of things I've been saying, which is adaptability. So, depending on what it depends on what the role is. So there's, if we're trying to fill a specific, more senior role, for instance, it will get more targeted about, do you have these skills that we're looking for, and do we think that there's room for you to grow? Absolutely. And I think for roles that are more coming out of college, for instance, or more entry level roles, in those we tend to take more of an approach of, does this person have solid fundamentals and could be adaptable so that they grow with Kensho and can feel like, okay, I feel like I've exhausted maybe my growth on a particular team. I'm really interested in switching to a different team. We're really starting to think about making sure that people have that solid foundation, and we hire that way for the entry level roles. That way people can move around. And so it's hiring for folks that have shown adaptability and have shown that, given what you have, given the tools that you've been given, what have you done with those things, right? So I hope that answers the question.
I would tag in there a little bit, Melissa, and everyone who hasn't seen me on the camera yet, I'm Brian. I'm the recruiting lead at Kensho. But I would add to that with the senior, level people as well. We are looking for, obviously, as Melissa said, those adaptability type skills. But to circle back on like the 100% skill set, I don't necessarily think we look for that at all. We have within our interview process, for the most part, there's usually 3, 4, 5 skills that we're evaluating. It is never a conversation for us saying, if this person does not check all 5 of these 5 boxes, we can, like, this is the only way we hire this person. We look at, okay, like, hey, this person may have 3 of the 5 skills, and they have, and they have obviously shown that adaptability to learn, based on some story they told us or whatever it may be. And it shows us that they can learn these skills. So then when we onboard someone, we can look at, okay, what skills are they going to bring to us right away? And then how can we grow these other skills for this role, and train them in those areas to where they're able to check every box. And then once they're able to check every box, where can they go internally there from Kensho, whether it's another team, laterally, just working on a different project, or elevated to another role, leading a team or architecting or whatever it may be.
Thanks for jumping in on that, Brian. That's really helpful. All right, so one of these questions that just got submitted in the chat, I do want to get to, and it's kind of addressing this other question that we have here. Let me see if I can navigate to it. Okay. So the pre-submitted question, this person wanted to know, how do I stop second guessing my career decisions? I'm really interested in learning how to more confidently weigh opportunities and decisions. The question that was submitted in the chat that I think dovetails nicely with this, Amanda had asked, if you've decided you need to downshift your career, how can you overcome people telling you that you're overqualified for the roles for which you're applying? So let's maybe tackle the first one about how do you stop second guessing, because it seems like Amanda's question is a little bit about, worrying about how to make that choice, but then also like, how do you follow through on this, like more specifically on like the situation she's talking about. So let's start with the broad, like, how do you stop second guessing your career choices?
Yeah, sure. That sounds good. So yeah, I think sometimes we kind of become, deer in headlights when we're presented with change, right? So here are some things that I like to consider. One, that everything is a trade-off, right? We say this a lot in tech, but it applies in many areas. So I would look at a few pointed questions, ask yourself a few pointed questions first. And so the first bucket of questions I would ask is around support. So this doesn't get to the question that was asked to you in the chat, but it gets to just in general, which is, ask in the first bucket, I would say, like, ask yourself if you have family or caregiver responsibilities, right? And if you do, what does your ideal childcare situation look like, right? Does it involve you? Do the expectations for the role challenge that? Is your partner or spouse in a good position to be your support system? So I say this because usually we're second guessing a move that requires more responsibility. So this is a little bit different than the chat question, but in that case, when you're increasing your responsibility. So again, I'm not saying moving up or just your responsibility is increasing. Do you have a good support system if you need that? There was a time that I was offered an opportunity to lead a much larger team that I had at the time, and I turned it down because the timing just wasn't right for me. I didn't have the support system in place at the time to be able to put the hours in that I thought I believed to be necessary to support the team. So the second bucket of questions is around whether or not the role exposes you to new growth opportunities. So I think this gets more into the chat question there. So if you're exploring an opportunity at your company, the questions that you might want to ask are, are you getting more practice honing a skill? Are you getting more exposure to, a particular part of the tech stack that interests you? Do you have more avenues to make an impact given your strengths that we talked about, Tyler? So, is that a good move for you? That would answer that. And then secondly, if you're looking at a different company, I think the considerations here are a little bit more nuanced because people have a lot of reasons for leaving a company, and it can be scary the first time you do it. But it's also worth noting that the grass is not always greener; it's just different grass. So a couple questions that you want to ask yourself there before you jump ship to a new company or a new opportunity at a new company. Have you learned everything you've hoped to at your current company? Will this new role open more doors? Will you be expanding your network in a meaningful way? Do you get closer to some personal goals that you may have? Will this company support you in ways that are at least as good as your current company or better? And if the opportunity doesn't come by way of a referral, right? So maybe you don't know folks at the company. So if you don't know folks at the company, then you really want to try to meet as many people as you can. So either if you're interviewing or, through LinkedIn, but meet people you can at the company because you want to weigh that people heavily because plans change more quickly than people. So you want to make sure that you're going somewhere where you like the people that you work with. And in all of this, the questions that you ask yourself, I haven't mentioned compensation, and it's not that compensation isn't important, but I tend to weigh these intrinsic kind of motivators more heavily when it comes to career choices because I think it's a better indicator of your commitment and therefore your potential for success. So that gets at that question there. Any follow-ups, Meg, to hone in on the chat question?
So the only thing I would say is that at least I sit in on a lot of these, right? And a lot of them are hiring focused. A lot of them are job transition focused. And the one thing that I hear a lot, especially when you're trying to kind of combat that, like, well, you're overqualified kind of thing. One of the big things that you can focus on, especially if you're downshifting your career for a personal reason or something that you don't want to share, you don't have to share, you don't feel comfortable going into, that kind of thing. One of the great ways you can kind of address this, first off, being honest about why you're downshifting your career can give you a really good, like the reaction and the response from that new company can give you a really great sense of what their culture is. Remember, when you're interviewing with these companies, you're also interviewing them. Is this a place you really want to work? Or is it just like kind of the, any port in a storm, best of bad options, like that kind of thing. So like, and I know, not all job searches, especially now, are ideal or are, not everybody has the luxury of making these choices like without having to consider other, unfortunate and, inconvenient factors. But especially if you're trying to try to explain to somebody that you're not overqualified, you just want to focus on blah, blah, blah. One of the best ways I've heard is to kind of spin it as, well, here's what my career was focused on or what my job and my role was focused on before, but I really enjoy this part more. And that's where I'd like to continue developing and where I'd like to bring my strengths. So instead of, focusing on, asking questions like, well, what does the progression look like at this company? Is there room for advancement? If you focus more on asking things about maybe like work-life integration, or maybe asking things about like, how does your company support people as they develop their skills in a specific area, that looks less like you are overqualified and more like you're just trying to deepen your knowledge and your skill set for that area you're pursuing. I don't know if that's how Kensho sees it, but like that's the distillation of a lot of these chats that I've sat in on.
Yeah, I think that's great. No, and we do. I mean, we're very, we don't have a, in terms of career ladders, we don't have a very deep hierarchy. It's kind of very flat is not exactly the right word. But it's wide. And so, yeah, I think, for me, I mean, this is definitely true for me. I never actually thought about it as downshifting. I'll be honest, but I guess I am in that bucket, right? Where, I'd gone from a management role to like an individual contributor role, and I came off of maternity leave. But I looked at that as, these are my contributions. These are the strengths. This is what I want to focus on right now on my path. Right. So it doesn't have to be this linear thing. You can shift around and that's fine. Right. Again, as long as you're motivated by what you're doing, you're providing value to the company, you shouldn't look at it as that you're overqualified for that particular job. You're bringing your strengths, maybe a different set of strengths to that job at that time. So.
This is all super helpful for me. I know we're potentially short on time, and I'm afraid of being too strong of a presence here, but I think I have a really appropriate question if we have time.
Go for it.
I'm wondering, Melissa, if you could speak to your personal experience in terms of the transition, maybe both the transitions from leaving FactSet, going into whatever it was immediately after, and then coming out of that, I think, contract work, deciding to pursue Kensho, and in particular, what were things you hoped to find in your experience at Kensho?
It's a great question. Okay, I'm trying to condense this in like a minute. Yeah, so after I left FactSet, which by the way, let me just get real about my life experience there. So I was very much of the opinion I left after I was off of maternity leave. I decided to leave on really good terms with the company, but it was just a personal choice that I wanted to make at the time, and I was really strong about it, and I was really confident about it because I'd always wanted to be. My mom was home with me. I wanted to be home with my first. I just didn't know how long, and I also, the thing that I that I felt was really important was because I figured I'd want to get back in at some point. I said, okay, well, let me just not, it's like speaking a language. If you speak another language, if you don't do it after some time, it comes back to you, but you're like a little rusty, right? So I didn't want to be super rusty coming back. And so I decided, okay, well, what are some avenues that I can explore to kind of keep my foot in while I'm out on leave? And it also allows you to tap into that part of your brain that kind of goes away for the first few months of having a baby. So it's useful. And I decided, so I did contract work, but it was very scoped contract work because I didn't have the time to kind of go out and sell my abilities, right, to folks. So I had to keep it pretty scoped. I tapped into my network, which was helpful. So having a network is great. And then I also decided, you know what, I'm going to learn something new and fresh and also keep it scoped. So I picked up iOS development, and I developed an iPhone app and put it on the Apple Store. And that was all a really cool experience. And there was kind of some side benefits there, which is just because you have an idea doesn't mean it's going to be successful. Like, you have to actually know how to monetize it. So I learned a lot is what I'm saying. So I think that keeping your foot in the door and continuously learning, even when your career kind of takes a pause, is really useful. And then you can have those experiences and bring them to a new company. So then with Kensho, that was, I was trying to decide, well, what do I do when I was ready to go back in? Do I potentially go back to FactSet, because they had left that door open. At the time we had moved to Massachusetts, and I said, well, do I do remote with FactSet? Do I do something else? And I had a connection already to Kensho. I had a couple connections to Kensho, and was being pulled in. So again, it's having that network really helps, and really fostering that network, because people still are the ones that kind of plug you into new opportunities. And I started off at 20 hours a week, and I started off as an individual contributor, and then I quickly ratcheted that up as I felt comfortable. And I was very upfront with the company, like, I can only give 20 hours a week. Is that cool? Yeah, that's cool. And then, little by little, as my kids grew older and started going into school, into daycare and stuff like that, and I felt confident in that, I shifted back in a little bit more. And now I'm shifted in, and my husband is the one who's the primary support system at home, which is great. But so this is, there's a lot to consider here. There's keeping your foot in the door, keeping your network, and having that support system allows you to make these types of shifts.
Yeah, I just thank you for that. It's interesting to hear perspectives of people who have, crossed the transitional boundaries in some ways, where they've explored the unknown that perhaps you have not yet explored. So thank you for this.
You're welcome.
Thanks for all the great questions, Tyler. That was really, you had some really awesome ones in the chat as well as live. So thank you so much for that. All right, so before we wrap up here, because we don't have to have a hard stop in a minute, but I do know that other people have to jump. So let's shift over here. So I know Brian was going to address parts of this, but what positions is Kensho currently looking to fill? Can you kind of speak to some of the openings and maybe some of the positions that you're keen to fill maybe sooner than others?
Yeah, absolutely. So in terms of hiring, probably the first thing you'll see when you go on to Kensho's page or learn anything about us is that we're very heavy engineering company. So we're about 115, 120 people. I believe the last we looked at the numbers, I think it's updated on the site now, we're about 85% engineers. So it's a heavy engineering environment, as well as, we have quite a few product managers as well. So we're hiring primarily right now in the engineering space. We're hiring across multiple teams as well, I would add. So, whether you're a back-end engineer, we have skilled, people for back-end or API development type roles, data in the data space and data engineering, as well as infrastructure, machine learning as well, because there's a heavy presence of what Kensho really does. So we're hiring across all of those teams. And really there are a lot of interchangeable parts of the interview process. So if you're not really sure, like, I don't know if I'm a fit looking at our job descriptions for backend or data, like, just apply, feel free, comfortable applying in, reaching out to someone like myself. We're more than happy to talk about what role might make the most sense for you. So don't just feel like you can only apply in for one role and like we would never consider you for anything else. Part of my conversation is figuring out, with you is, what role are you really most interested in? Because I don't want to, I personally don't want to put someone in for a role and get them into the interview process that they're not going to like, right? So I want to help you find the role at Kensho that would be the best fit for you. And then I would add, to that favorite part about working at Kensho, and I'm sure Melissa could add something to this, would be, I really think it's a culture of that continuous learning and internal mobility, as Melissa spoke to, where we're really try to find we want to put people in positions where they really shine and take the skills they have coming in the door and use those skills so they can really be great at what they do, coming in day to day, but also figure out, where are someone's weaknesses, whether that's, from your interview or as you start working here, from those internal mobility type interviews that we've done in the past, and figure out, okay, this is where you want to be. So how can we address those skills while, keeping you doing your day to day, but how do we grow the other skills you need to get to where you are in the next level? And whatever that may be.
That's so great. Melissa, do you have anything else to add to that? Anything different about what you really specifically love about working at Kensho?
Yeah, I mean, I've had various different roles at Kensho, so I can speak a lot to it. And I really feel like the size is a really nice sweet spot size. And we are not trying to, double or anything like that by any means. We're trying to keep nimble. But I think it's really nice because you really get to know people. Really, even in the pandemic, we have several people who have started during the pandemic who have not been, have not even seen us face to face before in any of our 3 offices. But even then, we're already starting to make connections with these folks, and it's nice because it's pretty small and tight knit in that way. And then I'll mention too the continuous learning. That's not just a thing that we say. Like, we really believe in that. We have every first Thursday of each month, we have a knowledge day where folks are really encouraged to unplug and just learn something new, bring it back to the company, especially if it's relevant. But we really do a lot of that if you look at it. We have another thing called Tuesday Tutors that we have a Kenshin kind of sponsoring that, where we have lunch and share, now we do it remotely, but have lunch and share a video of a conference or something like that, or a tech talk. And we also have, engineering-wide syncs bi-weekly, so people really get to know, like, what is it that folks are working on other teams. We do that a lot. So I think it's a great culture.
And I'll add real quick on the hiring, because I know in early on it said we're Boston based, and we are. We are also hiring in the New York City area, as well as the DC, Virginia area, as well as we have office space in both of those locations.
Thank you so much for that. So there are a couple people asking about remote hiring. Is it like remote positions, like pandemic or not? Or is it one of those things where, like, you should really look at the positions that are maybe closer to your area because that's what you're looking to go back in after the pandemic is, more.
Yeah. That's a great question. I'll take this one. We had a good discussion about this, the senior leaders at the company, of, what do we want to do? Because a lot of tech companies are going fully remote. And we really landed on the side of, we value the face-to-face. However, we also recognize that we've been afforded a lot of flexibility during this time too, right? And there's kind of that silver lining of, well, now you have an extra half hour with your kids in the morning, perhaps, or whatever it is. You don't have to commute as far. So we're trying, the specifics are TBD, but we are hiring within some radius of those locations, so that you can come into the office however many times a week we would expect, but there's going to be that flexibility where it doesn't have to be every single day necessarily, but it's got to be some regular cadence. So we are looking around those 3 areas.
Sorry, I couldn't find my mute button. So thank you so much for spending time with us today. Thank you, Brian, as well, for jumping in to help us get some more clarity on some of the hiring and the culture at Kensho. It's really great to hear. I just dropped a ton more links into the chat, and a lot of them are repeats, but just one thing to call out again to remember is to go ahead and check out the Kensho's page on Power to Fly. Obviously, not all of their roles will be there, so feel free to check out Kensho's website as well. But just know that if you do apply via Power to Fly, there is a Power to Fly team member that works with Kensho that follows up on your resume. So even, in the best systems, these are people and things can sometimes get missed or fall through the cracks or whatever. But there's also kind of somebody in your corner that's following up to be like, hey, this person showed interest, or, where are they in your process, that kind of thing. So just keep that in mind. Make sure you follow if you'd like. I put a link to our upcoming virtual chats. So if you'd like to spend more time with me or other community partners, as well as client companies, please feel free to check those out. I also dropped a LinkedIn URL for Melissa as well as myself if you'd like. I can't help you get a job at Kensho, but Melissa could probably give you more information on either today's subject or Kensho in general. Yeah, so as we do that, I just want to say again, thank you so much to both Brian and Melissa. I know that it's not you took time out of your days to prepare for this as well as to be here with us, and we're so grateful for that. And I'm super thankful for our amazing audience, guys. This was great. It's a really nice way to enter the weekend for me as well as for Brian and Melissa. Y'all submitted great questions ahead of time. The participation was just amazing today's chat. So thank you so much for that. And I really encourage you all to come check out future events with us. So on that note, have a great weekend. I'll close the session out. We'll leave the chat open for a little while so you guys can grab links. And we'll see you next week. Bye, everybody.
Thanks so much, Meg.